Knuckles was silent, so that wouldn't work into this situation. But, good morning.
Good morning.
Everything okay? Okay. I worked with a man who had been in seclusion for 30 years. I'll call him John. John had been held in a straitjacket continually for 3 years because every time he had human contact, he came out fighting. He'd never been evaluated because he attacked everyone who approached him. No one knew if he was mentally impaired, schizophrenic, or even if he understood language. John was brought to the residential facility where I was working for an evaluation. I was asked to consult because I had experienced calming people who had problems with violence. John was small and wiry. He was about 5'6" and weighed about 120 pounds. The director assigned 4 of the biggest, strongest residence assistants to escort him into the building, but John still put out 3 windows with his feet in the hallway on the way to his room. I spent an hour preparing to meet John to ensure that I was well-grounded and in optimum mental, physical, and emotional balance. I opened the door to his room and, making sure I was closer to the door than he was to me, stood in a non-threatening stance. John was pacing back and forth to the other end of the room, and I tried to get a sense of what it might feel like to be in his skin. I introduced myself and explained why I was there. He continued pacing and ignored me. John had an extreme amount of tension in his shoulders and neck and forehead, and I guessed that he must have a pretty bad headache. I told him I had some experience in working with tension and that sometimes I could help people get rid of headaches. I suggested that he sit on the end of the bed and I'd see what I could do. He sat down. This was the first indication that he understood language. I tried to relax his neck and shoulders, but it had no effect, so I sat down next to him and talked for a while, and he never acknowledged me or looked at me. When I ran out of things to say, I got up and left. There was a big crowd of people looking through the little window in the door, and the nurse who had admitted him was saying, "This never happens. He always attacks." But there was a new staff person in the crowd, a young man I'd never seen before, and he said, "That's nothing." And he walked in, sat next to John, talked to him, and he wasn't attacked. That young man put his finger exactly on what worked. Nothing. For 30 years, every person who tried to make contact with John was expecting a fight. And he gave it to them, more than they could handle. Then, twice in one day, 2 guys come in who aren't expecting a fight, and he doesn't attack. It was the attendants' fear that kept John locked up for 30 years. Their fear triggered his fear, and his reaction escalated and intensified their fear. Fear can lock us up and keep us there. It restrains and limits us, makes us vulnerable to manipulation, and interferes with learning, problem solving, and effectiveness. Fear puts body and mind into crisis mode and prepares us to run or fight. Everything not essential for survival shuts down, so all our energy can be used to deal with the immediate threat. Crisis mode is like being chased by a bear. Okay? We don't stop and think about where we're going. We don't pay attention to what we might be stepping in or on. We don't pause to assess the best course of action. We just get the hell out of there. We don't reach out or try to understand other people when we're in crisis mode. We don't listen or learn. There's no time for creativity or new ways of seeing things. Our mind is pulled to simple, quick solutions, and what seemed to work before, even when that's the worst possible thing we can do. It's easy to get stuck in fear. Fear that doesn't lead to immediate action builds muscle tension. The mind recognizes the buildup of tension and narrows its focus to potential threats. Thinking about threats without working on them creates more tension, which narrows our mind further. This builds more tension, creating a self-escalating process. We become vulnerable to fear whenever there's a buildup of tension. Being stressed out, frustrated, exhausted, or emotionally drained pulls us toward thoughts and messages of fear like iron to a magnet. Since fear gets and keeps our attention, It's a really useful tool for media and entertainment industries. Fear is also a highly effective political tactic. It's easy to manipulate voters when fear keeps us from taking time to understand issues, question assumptions, and look beyond talking points and spin. This is particularly harmful because fear becomes easily generalized. If I'm bitten by a dog, I can easily become afraid of all dogs. The problem is much more serious because the fear that permeates our culture today is not based on our personal experience. It's a top-down fear that's intentionally spread by media and political groups that benefit from it. We become afraid of all immigrants, all liberals, all Republicans, all people who are different from or disagree with us. This leads to either-or thinking and a breakdown of communication and cooperation. When we're in the grip of fear, we tend to look for a strong leader to keep us safe without questioning whether he or she has our best interests at heart. A common reaction to fear among leaders is to seek power and domination over potential threats. But the people who are then powerless and dominated seek other leaders to regain power and dominate those who previously ruled. This has led to an ongoing cycle of escalating fear that's lasted for thousands of years. Fear has become a habit in today's world. It's the default choice. If we go with the flow, fear will find us. Fear is one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual growth. Spirituality is a process of opening to the work of Spirit in our lives. Fear narrows our focus while blocking receptivity and insight. Spiritual development requires humility and compassion. Fear makes us more self-centered and numbs us to the needs of others. Think of saints, mystic, gurus, great spiritual leaders. Each of them transcended fear and found inner peace. According to Rabbi Sonia Saltzman, there is one phrase that God repeats in the Jewish Bible more than any other: Altira. Fear not, don't be afraid. Appears more than 80 times. The Quran states, fear is a disease that consumes the soul of the one who embraces it. Lao Tzu said, be careful what you water your dreams with. Water them with worry and fear, and you will produce weeds that choke the life from your dream. In the Course of Miracles, it is written, whenever you are afraid, you are deceived, and your mind cannot serve the Holy Spirit. In the Bhagavad Gita, excuse me. In the Bhagavad Gita, I'll go on with that, the Blessed Lord provides a description of the divine qualities necessary for spiritual development. Fearlessness is listed first. The Buddha said, the whole secret of existence is to have no fear. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your heart be troubled, and do not be afraid. We talk about overcoming and fighting fear, but engaging in battle with fear creates tension, which leads to more fear. Suppressing or dismissing fear allows it to fester and build into something even more nasty and destructive. Fear is part of our nature and can't be defeated. We can't beat fear, but we can understand it and put it in its place. There are three kinds of fear: natural fear, mental fear, and structural fear. Natural fear is a reaction to an immediate threat. Mental fear is a response to thinking about threats, past or future, real or imagined. Structural fear is the buildup of muscle tension that results from trauma, stress, exhaustion, and mental fear. Natural fear gets our energy and provides attention to run, fight, or freeze. Gets our attention and provides energy to run, fight, or freeze in order to maximize our chances of survival. This actually tends to work against us when confronting human dangers. Most of the perils we face in the modern world require clear vision and understanding, functions that shut down when we're in crisis mode. When I was in my 20s, I was sitting in my car talking to a friend when I felt the barrel of a gun pressing against my temple. If I had allowed fear to trigger the fight or flight response, the trigger on that gun might have been pressed. Fortunately, I took a few breaths and focused on understanding what was going on. My friend, who hadn't told me she was married, got out of the car and ran away. Her husband got in and took her seat, gun in hand. I listened as long as he wanted to talk. Eventually, he put his gun in his pocket, got out of my car, and walked away. Natural fear exists in the moment and lasts only for a moment. When I was in Kenya, I saw wildebeest standing less than 30 yards away from a pride of lions who were devouring their carcass. The wildebeest didn't seem afraid because the lions had what they wanted and were no longer a threat. Bringing truth to natural fear allows it to dissipate in seconds. We recognize the nature of the threat and shift our focus to understanding and responding to the situation. My fear dissolved when there was a gun to my head because I restored balance and focused on trying to understand the guy with his finger on the trigger. The same thing happened in dealing with the man who was in seclusion. Bringing truth to fear allows us to see the situation as it is and focus on how best to deal with it. Truth reminds us there's a best way to handle any situation. If it looks like death is imminent, we can focus on how best to die. There's a shift from what might happen to what is happening, from worst-case outcome to process. When we bring truth to fear, we realize that confronting dangerous threats is actually a rare occurrence for most of us. There are no immediate threats to safety or well-being in most of our lives most of the time. The primary source of our fear is in our own minds. It's the thought of fear that keeps us afraid. Mental fear focuses on the past and the future. It lasts as long as we keep thinking about it. It's helpful to understand how this affects our brain. Scientists say our brain is plastic, but I think it's more helpful to say that our brains are forming. Thoughts, perceptions, and experience create pathways made up of connections between neurons. They're like roads in our brain. Going back and forth across an empty field eventually creates a road. Repeating a certain line of thinking has the same effect on our brain. When a road is used a lot, it becomes well-worn or paved, making it easier to travel on. It becomes the only way to get where we want to go. At any given moment, we are either creating new pathways or reinforcing old ones. Pathways associated with fear are like superhighways. They're the easiest to travel on because they're related to survival. Fear pulls our thoughts to the same pathways again and again while keeping us from forming new ones. When we fail to access other pathways, those connections start to fade. As stress and fear increase, alternative ways of thinking and perceiving disappear. We stop creating new roads and no longer choose paths that expand how and what we think. Circuits in our brain become like railroad tracks that narrowly limit where thought and perception can take us. We become trapped in our own brain and are no longer free. The worst part is that we're not even aware that we've given up freedom in reaction to mental fear. Structural fear develops when the buildup of tension becomes chronic, or when we experience trauma without dealing with the emotional effects. Fear gets structured in our body as chronic muscle tension that results from resisting the full experience of emotion. As we've seen, the buildup of tension pulls our thoughts to narrowly focus on real or imagined threats. Mental fear contributes to structural fear, which feeds mental fear, creating more structural fear. Natural fear is in our perception of the moment. Mental fear is in our thoughts. Structural fear is in our bodies. Trying to turn our thoughts away from fear is not easy in the heat of the moment, especially if we're already carrying a lot of stress and mental fear. Adrenaline pushes every muscle cell to pull us to run or fight, while forcing our minds to focus on whatever did or could go wrong. It's like trying to turn a corner at 60 miles an hour. There are people who can do it. I mean, I've seen it in movies. But most of us need to slow down first. The key is to start by stopping the buildup of tension. Slowing down and restoring balance is the first step to bringing truth to fear. Truth brings clarity to what's happening. When we restore balance and stop feeding mental fear, mental and emotional resources that can solve the problem come back online. We see through a larger frame. Our filter is clear. We can focus on understanding what's happening and work out and adapt a strategy for figuring out how to deal with it. Restoring balance allows us to become fully ourselves and to realize the truth of who we really are. The easiest way to do this, in my experience, is to start with the body. There are two things I found to be consistently helpful in my own life and in working with my patients and students. The first involves how we breathe. Fear pulls our breathing up to our chest and speeds it up. Restoring natural breathing involves deeper, slower breaths that move our diaphragm in a very easy rhythm, 3 to 4 seconds down, 3 to 4 seconds up. And I learned over time that that rhythm was critical. That movement stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which actually takes us out of crisis mode. It can stop the buildup of tension in less than a minute. This technique can be learned in 10 minutes, but it can take up to 6 weeks of regular practice to restore natural breathing because of the way our body adapts to chronic stress and tension. The second thing is to ground. We can bend our knees, let our jaw relax, and allow our skeleton to support us. Paying attention to how and where we tense allows us to let it go as soon as it starts to build. The essentials of grounding can also be learned in about 10 minutes, but in my experience, the process of becoming aware of and letting go of patterns of tension can be fine-tuned over a lifetime. There are videos on my website that explain how these techniques work. If we wait until we're consumed by fear to practice these techniques, it's likely we'll forget or be unable to use them because the surge of energy is too great. Resolving built-up tension through regular practice takes the pressure off, which allows us to see, think, and understand rather than run, fight, or freeze. Once we've restored balance to our bodies, it's much easier to work on letting go of mental fear. We learn from past threats and transform future and current threats into caution and concern. Fear narrows our awareness. Caution expands it. Fear pulls our thoughts towards simplistic or old solutions and drives us to act right now. Concerns have a history and context that demand reflection and understanding. Fear makes us charge forward with our head down. Concern leads us to develop and adapt strategies that fit with changing circumstances. Breaking the cycle of fear allows us to see a larger picture and relevant details more clearly. We can respond rather than react, learn, adapt, and strategize rather than grab onto what we believe worked before. Focusing on process rather than outcome allows us to foresee obstacles and see opportunities and creative solutions. Restoring balance to our bodies permits us to fully experience the emotions that keep us locked up. This allows us to gradually recover from structural fear. It also permits our hearts to open so that we recognize the dignity and potential of all life and realize our interconnectedness. We can experience compassion, take responsibility, keep our ego out of the way, and allow hope to steer us toward peace. Fear has grabbed and held human attention while limiting our understanding and focus for the past few thousand years. It's worse now than ever due to mass media and the increasing sophistication of political tacticians. What might happen if we brought truth to fear? I planted a 6-inch dogwood tree in a distant meadow on our property back in 1991, and I assume it didn't survive that summer's drought. I was walking in the area in early spring, 17 years later, when I spotted it. It was the same size as I planted it, and still alive. I dug it up, and I transplanted it into our garden, which had rich organic soil and a big tall fence to keep out predators. My wife asked me, "Why are you planting that chewed up spindly stick?" And I explained it was the dogwood tree that I planted all those years ago, and it was still alive. Well, now that dogwood tree is over 8 feet tall. It's covered with delicate white flowers in spring, or delicate flowers in spring and small white berries in winter. On a recent Christmas, 5 pairs of cardinals enjoyed dinner on our dogwood in the garden. So I asked, what's the true nature of a dogwood tree? Clearly it's to go tall and be covered with flowers that turn into berries that provide dinner for cardinals and delight for humans. Becoming a chewed up spindly stick was simply how the seedling adapted to ongoing threats of deer, rabbits, and drought. Removing those threats allowed the true nature of the dogwood tree to emerge. A respected archaeologist recently wrote that there's no evidence of war or hierarchy in the first 95% of human existence. It's only in the past few thousand years that man-made fear has dominated our consciousness. It's only in the past few decades that mental fear has become a part of daily life. What would our lives be like if we... So how have we adapted to these perceived threats? Could we be the human equivalent of a chewed up spindly stick? What would our lives be like if we stopped feeding mental fear? If we restored and maintained balance, expanded our perceptions, committed to the truth, and developed an attitude of inclusion and connection that created conditions that allowed each human to develop his or her full potential? What would happen if we brought truth to fear?